Today I want to go over the three drafts from the HLE T1 series the other day in the LCK playoffs. This was a great example of how draft, yes, is very important to the game, but it's not a 100% decider of the outcome. In my opinion, T1 had winning drafts all three games, and they got stomped 3-0. The games might have been pretty close at times, but it was pretty decisive on the side of HLE. So jumping in, they first pick Orianna on blue side. This is pretty interesting because Azir's banned. You have other picks like Ryze. You have picks like Annie up. They decide to go with the Orianna first pick. And so T1 immediately go with, okay, what can punish the Orianna really easily? Ori's really immobile and depends solely on her flash for mobility. Jarvan is a typical answer into her, and they also lock Nico, which not only is Carrier's best champion currently, but it kind of fits with that theme of AoE lockdown, being able to abuse the Orianna with no flash. And then with the Galio lock on 3 as well, T1 just basically have an AoE team fight press R comp. They all have really good synergy together, and if they can get to this team fight stage and layer their ultimates well, they should be pretty successful. HLE had Poppy and Aurora on 2-3. I think the Poppy's actually quite good because she's good into Jarvan, can block that dash. Galio also has a dash he can block, and the Poppy ult is always going to have some sort of value. The Aurora blind pick for top is kind of just fine. It's usually answers for something like Rumble or Jax in the lane. HLE banned Rumble themselves, so it's a fine pick. It's not bad. It's not great. It's definitely just there, and it's going to have some effectiveness in the game. T1 go ahead and take Sion top lane into the Aurora. I think this is interesting because you're basically saying, yeah, I'm going to get smoked in the lane, probably be down 20 CS and perma shoved under my tower with half my HP missing at all times. But what T1 is basically saying is, get through the lane phase. Once we get to the team fight stage, we will be just fine. The problem with T1's comp so far is that they lack damage immensely. So they definitely need a hyper carry ADC, which they kind of lock in with Kai'Sa on pick 5, but with Lucian Braum on HLE, they definitely have a strong bot lane duo there for sure. T1's biggest strength here is AoE teamfighting. If they can get to that stage around objectives, I think they can do just fine if they execute their ult layering well. Otherwise, HLE might have a better time in this game, but I definitely like T1's draft a lot. Let's head to game 2. So here we are in game 2. HLE actually left open Pantheon on blue side, so T1 go and scoop that up right away, which is very, very nice. HLE first rotate Ryze and Ambessa. This is interesting because they're just trying to grab the two prio power picks in solo lanes. They're most likely going to be locking Xin or Trundle on 3, I would assume. And that's basically locked because T1's already had their jungler locked, so they can't take that away. So HLE is just saying we might as well grab these two power picks before our jungler's locked anyways. T1 go ahead and rotate Annie and Gwen. I think this is perfectly fine. I think that Annie usually does okay into the Ryze. It's just a very strong champion in general. It's not going to be a very interactive lane, but come teamfight stage, I do think Annie Pantheon does have some good CC and lockdown power. And then the Gwen into Ambessa is interesting. Ambessa is actually usually picked into the Gwen as a pretty solid lane matchup, one of the few that can actually survive Gwen lanes in terms of melee champions. So it's interesting that T1 opted into the Gwen into Ambessa lane, but Gwen is perfectly fine. She'll do fine in the lane and she'll scale perfectly well into the game. And then with HLE going Vi over Xin Zhao on 3, I think this is a pretty big blunder. I think Vi just isn't that great of a champion, especially in competitive. I would much prefer Xin Zhao in this game, especially paired with the skirmishing of the Ambessa. Yes, you have that double R button kind of divey aspect with the Vi and the Ambessa, so there's some synergy there, but I just think Xin Zhao is a much better champion in general. So HLE continue with their hard dive theme here with Rell on R4. This is interesting because Alistar was actually banned by T1 themselves, so HLE get to scoop up the Rell and not have any super effective melee counter picks available. So T1 actually round out with a really, really good rotation here. Xayah is one of the best champs, if not the best champion into hard dive comps, along with the Renata paired with that. So this is a really great bot lane rotation because you see hard dive on Ambessa, Vi, and Rell. They all have to go in. They can't do anything other than that. So this rotation from T1 to round out is really, really good. HLE do counter well with Ziggs being able to outrange the Xayah in the Renata, not having to run into them. But I think the Renata Xayah value is huge this game, and I would definitely take T1's draft overall over HLE as they have really solid scaling. They're not outscaling, but it's pretty even scaling within the game. But just thematically, Gwen, Renata, and Xayah are all going to do really well into HLE's comp. So taking a look at game 3 here, T1 go ahead and B1 the Yunara. This is perfectly fine. Yunara is a very, very strong champion. And of course, Azir is literally permabanned on red side, so Faker's never going to get the opportunity to play that on blue side. So Yunara is probably the most optimal B1 pick. The only other option probably would have been to take Xin Zhao with all of the other AD skirmishers out of the pool, and Wukong banned. Xin is basically the only one left, but Yunara is just fine. HLE take the Xin Zhao, in fact, and then they take the Jax to pair with it. This is pretty interesting. I think blinding Jax this early could be kind of dangerous, as T1 answer it with Gragas, so it's not the hardest of counter picks, but it's definitely going to be a rough-ish lane for Jax. He's never going to die, obviously, but he's definitely going to probably be pushed in, and if he ever goes for a trade on the Gragas, he can just be body slammed and comboed by the Gragas pretty easily. I do really like the Alistar pick from HLE, though. It does fine into the Rakan, and of course having lockdown CC against a hyperscaler like Yunara is always very helpful. So having these 3 melee kind of dive champions for HLE is good, but the peel from Gragas and Rakan can also be very effective, especially for their Yunara being able to scale in DPS in later game team fights. So HLE actually take a really big risk here and blind pick Sylas for Zeka. Obviously, he's one of Zeka's best champions, so you can't really doubt it. But it's definitely risky as Sylas is a very easily counterable champion, and I will say that T1 don't have the best ultimates for Sylas to steal. That is before the Cassio and Qiyana round out. This is the big blunder I think T1 made in this draft. I think Qiyana is super overrated. I think this champ is really, really bad and competitive, along with pretty much every assassin. Zed you can sometimes see some effectiveness with, but overall I think the assassin class just is not built for competitive play. I think this was the only blunder in T1's draft. Otherwise, thematically, they're set up quite nicely. I think that HLE, again, with 4 melee champs into Yunara, Cassio, is going to be really tough to play. Overall, I think T1 actually had even, if not winning drafts, in my opinion, in all 3 of these games, and they got stomped 3-0. So this series is a great example of how winning drafts don't always translate to wins, but you can definitely use this aspect of the game to put yourself at winning advantages entering the game. HLE just happened to outplay T1 in these 3 games. Hopefully they can turn it around and still sneak into Worlds and the LCK. Thanks for watching. See you next time.